Welcome back to Car-Pinionated, our weekly show on cars, the car industry, and driving in general. I'm Doug Stewart, digital executive producer for Fox 61 in Hartford. And with me is my friend Glenn Packman, Fairfield County resident, noted interior designer, home appraiser, comedy genius, an all-around good guy. You keep getting a longer resume, Glenn.
I want to keep working on that. I want to pan out into new areas, you know.
Okay.
Um,
You're a Renaissance man.
Renaissance, yeah, okay, that works. You could tag me with some sort of like savant about geography kind of thing,
Ah,
because yes, full of completely useless geographic knowledge. I love geography. It will never serve any sort of purpose, but
okay. All
it's
right. Cool. So, Glenn, we're going to talk about the new Jeep Cherokee,
cool.
um, which is, we're getting dribs and drabs of information, but I wanted to go over kind of the Cherokee history
Mhm.
because the first real Cherokee model was kind of a defining car, an automotive icon. I will say that, and I don't think I'd get a lot of disagreement. So the Cherokee name starts with um, obviously the tribe, and that's a problematic thing in the names the car's history.
Mhm.
But it was a model, like a trim level, I believe, and then it became the name for a two-door shortened version of the big Wagoneer.
Right.
And round about the early 80s, the late 70s, early 80s, when American Motors joined forces with Renault, they started designing this SUV. They didn't really call it an SUV at that point, but they started designing this. And in the history of the Cherokee SJ, that first real Cherokee model, um, there's a lot of Renault French influence.
Sure.
I can remember like the seats were very much like taken out of a Renault Alliance. I seem to remember a lot of the interior design, a lot of the thing. It was very much there were it was very American design, but it was also a very French design in some tiny little ways.
Mhm.
Um, Surprisingly, it was a unibody construction where a lot of people had only talked about, body on frame SUVs. It was much smaller than most of SUVs at the time. It
Mhm.
came in four doors as a compact SUV. Um, the Blazer, S10 Blazer and S15 Jimmy were also introduced about a year before, but they only came as two doors. For a long time, they only came as two doors. So that first Cherokee, the XJ, introduced around 80 in 83 as an 84 model,
Mhm.
had a Cherokee, and the highest trim level was called a Wagoneer, and they had wood on the sides and all that other stuff. It sold a lot. It was really, really popular, and you remember that time period. They were everywhere, right?
Mhm.
And then you know Chrysler bought American Motors primarily for the Jeep division,
Mhm.
and started, then took over the building. And there's a lot of history in what Chrysler did and moved on and changed and kind of brought together. It was redesigned, it was tweaked in about 96, a little bit of taillight and headlight changes, but was sold pretty much as is, not a lot of difference through 2001 in this country, and in some countries as late as 2014, which I didn't realize until I looked some stuff up today. What do you remember about the XJ?
Well, specifically, an experience in it would have been about 1989, 90-ish. I was working, I just moved to California and I was working for a place that did design mock-ups for printing, an industry that doesn't really exist anymore. It's all done on a computer. But we used to do it all by hand. And I moved to California with two roommates. I'm really going off on a tangent here, by the way. I moved to California with two roommates from school, from college. We got a place in North Hollywood. They promptly got jobs back in Virginia Beach and abandoned me. So, considering I couldn't afford the big apartment on my own, I found a place that was literally a studio. It was a room behind a garage, private entrance. It was a shack. It was a shack. It did have a bathroom. It had a tiny little kitchen and one room, and that was it. But it was mine, and I got to live by myself. And the place needed a whole slew of work, and the landlady didn't mind if I did anything. She was like, "Whatever you want to do, you go right ahead." She wasn't going to pay me for any of it, so it was done on the cheap. And one of the walls desperately needed more than just a little bit of work, so I needed some paneling. Now, I drove at that point my VW Fox, and a sheet of paneling was never, ever, ever going to fit on that. And if I tried to put it on top of the roof, the car probably would have taken off for several yards before landing. Yeah. So I asked one of my bosses at work if I could borrow his vehicle, which was one of these Jeep Cherokees, and that was my introduction to it. I really enjoyed it. The only downside was that it was not a big car either, but I did manage to get the paneling slid all the way in. The problem was it came over the passenger and, the back seat and into the driving area. And it was like just time. So I had to literally drive like this to fit. It was worth it. But I did get to drive it before I loaded everything up. And I was completely impressed by this car because it was so easy to drive. And I thought for sure I was going to be driving a truck. It was called a truck back then. It had a very trucky feel to it, but I also really recognized right off the bat that this is just a car kind of on stilts. It was just tall, and that commanding view of the road was the first thing that I noticed. And it just sort of flashed through my mind like, why aren't we doing more cars like this and making them a little bit more car-like and appealing to a wider market? Then again, like 10 years earlier, I thought, why aren't people just introducing songs without the lyrics that people could sing to in a bar in front of their friends? And people were like, "You're dumb. What? Who would do that?"
Hey, man, first when cameras first started coming on cell phones, I go, who's ever going to use a camera on their cell phone?
Thank you. Right, right. All the things that we think of that, that the movers and shakers get done without us. But either way, that was my thoughts back then. Was I didn't I didn't quite tap into the idea that this might be a complete separate market someday, in another 10 years. But back then was a different story. And I just remember that this sort of appealed to the people that understood how utilitarian a minivan was, but would never drive one. You know,
Yeah.
it didn't have any sort of a sporting aspect to it. It was there to haul people and kids and stuff. This did the same thing, but it also had aspirations to go off road. It it just it looked like a
And it could, and it could. See,
it
it
could,
was a
right,
capable vehicle.
right, exactly, and it looked like something to take camping, not to camp in, but to go to the campsite with. It looked like something that towed vehicles, and it looked rugged and outdoorsy.
Mhm.
And that appealed to a whole swath of people, and there was just no denying it. It wasn't the car I wanted to drive back then. Moreover, because basically I just needed something that got 10,000 miles to the gallon because I needed that. But I walked away from this thinking this was a really easy car to drive, and I was dreading it. And that was the beginning of it all for me.
Yeah,
So
and I think too, like once it got the 4 liter straight six,
yeah,
I think that really transformed because
for sure.
the first TV station I worked for had a couple of them, and they were beat to death by the time I was there. But they had the 2.8 liter V6, which was, but once I drove one with a 4 liter,
Yeah,
that was a boss car.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I mean, they stumbled onto something there.
And
I,
interesting, you're right. They stumbled on it. They kind of like the same concurrently with the minivan. At that time, two completely different companies.
mhm,
How much of what they got right about the Cherokee and how much of what they got right out of the box about minivans? What
right.
Chrysler did for minivans and American Motors,
Hmm.
you know, got right for the Cherokee for that class of SUV.
Right.
I like I said, we had it at the first TV station I worked for, and then I bought one, which was not one of the best examples because it gradually fell apart. But I bought it because it was the top level trim, and frankly, I looked really good behind the wheel of a Cherokee,
Mhm.
and I liked it. And then it kept. I didn't have it very long, and I traded in on a nice new Dodge Shadow in the Glenn Packman world. I got rid of a crappy used car, and I bought a new car. So anyway, so but to go on with the Cherokee, go on with the Cherokee history. 2001 comes and Chrysler decides to replace it and uh, renames that size vehicle in their market the Liberty, and sort of oddly shaped,
Mm.
oddly designed,
Mhm.
um, kind of um, you know quirky in a and I use that term sometimes when I mean positive things and sometimes when I mean negative things, and this was not the positive things.
Yeah.
Um, and then a couple years later, they go and redesign it, I have said this before that I think the Liberty would have been much more successful had the second generation come out first
Right.
because it was much more squared. It had a lot of similarities design wise to the first gen X gen.
Right.
And then sold that for a while, was kind of middling successful, and then they brought back the Cherokee, and it was on a platform that was shared throughout um, Fiat Chrysler, which is what it was called at the time, which had its roots in several Fiats and maybe an Alfa Romeo and a bunch of different things. They all worked off a very similar platform and was completely nothing. Like had no character. It was really, honestly, the first iteration was kind of ugly. It had two like Aztec style 2 level headlights and just weird. Just
Yeah.
it wasn't very good looking. And they redesigned it, and it looks a lot better. I mean,
Mhm.
it's still an okay car. It has Jeep qualities, but I don't think that people look at it and say that's a vehicle that I could do anything with, right?
Right.
I think that is the sort of thing where they're just they don't see it, right? It doesn't come across as that's what I want. But here we are,
Yeah.
uh, halfway through, almost halfway through uh, 2025, and Jeep is coming out with a new Cherokee, a redesigned Cherokee, after not selling it for several years.
Mhm.
Um, what do you think of the looks of the new Cherokee?
Like it a lot. I think it's going back to the rugged sort of appeal, without going too crazy on it. A little bit more of that Jeep DNA, a little less Toyota RAV4. I always felt like that the Cherokee that you were talking about, that generation just seemed to be so squarely positioned against the RAV4 and cars in that vein, I think they lost the Jeep aspirations to it, that ruggedness, the car that you're not going to be so afraid to take off road. Do I know a lot of people off-roading in their RAV4s? No, no, I don't. And that's because it's not one of the aspirations of the car. That's an around town car. Great that you think you could do that in a RAV4. I don't know if I would try it. I'm a former RAV4 owner, and I don't mean to cack on it. It's an extremely popular car. And that's the best selling class of car in America and has been for at least 10 years now, is the
Oh yeah.
smaller SUV, the Escape, the Honda CRV, obviously. Great cars. Um, I think where Jeep needs to focus on is that rugged end of the spectrum, and this car seems to be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm anxious to see if it's a good car again. All of these ideas are great, but when the car turns out to be a clunker, I mean, beyond the styling mistakes of the Liberty was not a great car. It guzzled gas. Yeah, it needs to be a good car, on top of all this. Anxious to see, what people have to say about it. I would love to drive one when it comes out. Um,
Yeah, it's going to it's Car and Driver is predicting that it's going to start around 31,000 and go up to 42, depending on trims and options. The what is fairly standard at they're no one none of this is official, but they're looking at a hybrid, perhaps a plug-in hybrid, and perhaps battery. They're looking at a the Jeep calls the 4xe variation. So there's is but I think you're right. I think that let me say this. I like the new design, but I'm not bowled over by it.
right, right.
I think it's the right direction. It's heading in the right direction, but
Yeah,
I think it just still is. It's not far. It's not far enough. It doesn't. I think what I want it to be is more appealing to um, people. I think it's trying to appeal to too many different segments of the
sure.
market.
Of course.
The people who want it to, go out on a rainy day or snowy day to the supermarket, and the people who want to take it off road to do something, at least dirt roads or something, right?
Right.
And I think it's trying to split that difference, and I don't know if it's successful in either side.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
the Car Driver has some pictures of the interior, and it looks like a, a, a slightly decontented version of their electric Wagoneer S.
Hmm.
We talked about it last year, um, and we still have. I don't know if they're selling it, but you know,
Right,
that's a whole other
right,
thing. I keep hitting things here.
right.
Um,
I think
go
that you're
ahead.
saying a lot actually in that they're trying to aim for a very broad market. I mean, the bigger the size of the target, the easier it is to hit. But then you lose focus as soon as you make something wider and bigger, the focus becomes fuzzier. So I think they're just too concerned about trying to make such a pigeonhole project. But I think I kind of wonder what would a Jeep be like if it was just a really small Hummer, only better built. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
that's sort of a
yeah.
contradiction in terms of small Hummer, but I don't mean like the big massive car. I mean that thing that looks so chunky and solid that you don't think for a minute to not take it off road, you know?
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if there's some money in that,
Yeah.
is there a market for that car?
Well, look at the Bronco Sport. They're selling all of those.
Hmm.
To the
Yeah,
point where the Escape almost becomes irrelevant. I think they're
yeah.
still selling a bunch of Escapes, but but that Bronco Sport,
Mhm.
I run that down a dirt road. I
Mhm.
wouldn't think twice about it.
Right,
Why wouldn't do that for an Escape? You know,
right,
it's
right. I agree.
and you also have, and we talked about this in last week's show. You weren't able to be there, but we talked about the Compass,
Mhm.
and that they're introducing it in Europe, and it has a a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, and an EV power plant.
Mhm.
And they don't, because of the tariff situation, they don't know if they're going to be able to build it in Canada or the US. The money doesn't make sense.
Right.
That's certainly a business decision. But I think that it almost has almost the same problem where it's trying to appeal to both the supermarket crowd and the
Mhm.
actual potential off-road crowd.
Right.
And I think it's a little bit closer to the mark in terms of design, and that's all we really know about it is the
Yeah.
design.
Right.
Um, but I think it's closer to hitting that mark. It's chunkier, and
Mhm.
then there's also the Recon, which is, this other EV that's that they're thinking about bringing here, but like you can take the doors off. That's like a real,
Yeah.
you know, very much a Jeep Wrangler sort of play.
Right.
It's heartening to see Jeep heading in the right direction,
Hmm.
um, and not making globular cars anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
and at least designed with intent,
Yeah.
rather
Yep.
than trying to mold something around, a Dodge Caliper platform like the original Compass and Patriot used to make.
Not a great car. Yeah. Just I want to bring up a good point about Jeep and the positioning and about the rugged quality. And that is to just bring forth the name of the Renegade, which has sold pretty well, I think. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, but I mean, it's roughly maybe a little bit smaller, but it's in the same ballpark as the Bronco Sport. And talk about just a different flavor involved. The Renegade comes across as kind of fun, but to me, always a little dainty. Part of me wants to sit down with a bunch of 25-year-olds at some point and go, "What do you want to drive? If you had the money, what would you drive? I'm not talking mom and dad's money. I'm talking your money that you've earned.
Mhm. You're
Uh,
spending out of your wallet, yeah.
right, exactly. And what do you want to drive? Because I really don't know what that is. Um,
Hmm.
and
And I don't think they do.
right, I think that's just
I think that there's several problems there. There's less people young people getting driver's licenses.
mhm,
The cost barrier to entry is fantastic. New cars are pretty, outside of a Sentra or a Mirage or
mhm.
something, way at the low end of the market. They have to spend at least $30,000.
Right,
They're
right.
not, they're not making that amount of money, and they're not interested in driving because the car culture is different.
Yep.
And we can be sad about that as people who like cars who grew up with, oh, isn't that the new '76 Tornado, or stuff like that we were excited about. And I can remember a lot of other people were like, oh, you're so weird. But I, but so I don't think that younger people have a drive, pun intended, to to get a car. I think it's like it becomes the thing that they need,
Yeah.
that it's going to be what it is. It's probably going to be used. Like it's point A, point B. It's the people who buy Toyotas, right? They just want A to B. The people who used to buy Saturns hated cars, right?
Right. Right. Exactly.
I think Jeep just needs to get closer to what it is. Jeep just needs to figure out what people want Jeep to be, and if that's the way that's the way they can see themselves in the market, to go there.
Sure.
Because
Sure.
and look at the Forerunner and how they could sell the same Forerunner for 15 years,
Yeah. Right.
right?
Right.
And
Right.
and the and look at prices for used Forerunners, which are still up there. So you have definitely factors in that with Toyota
Sure.
reliability, all that stuff. But that niche of the market, that like slight slice of the market, Toyota's got.
We were on vacation a couple weeks ago, and we were down in southern Delaware, and in the area where we were for the afternoon was somebody driving an orange brand new Honda Passport, the new
The
really,
Chessport. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, yep, it had that.
And
It still
that is going to that market. That
right,
is like dead
absolutely.
solid. That's where that's the playground they want to be in.
The stuff coming out of Stellantis right now is not doesn't scream like it's going to last forever. There have been what's the Hornet. Um, there's all sorts of rumblings that the car's not put together well. It's not selling well either,
No.
And again, who does the Hornet appeal to?
Oh, that's a real good question. That's a real good question.
I think it's kind of sharp, actually. I mean, it's cute. It's it's got some neat. It's a little sporty, but I mean, am I gonna purchase this? I mean, I had the opportunity just recently, and I honestly, car didn't even enter into my radar because I was just worried about how well it's put together. And I'm being a little hypocritical because we had a Chrysler 200 that was a great car that got handed down to my stepson, and he drove it well over 100,000 miles. So operated well, and he sold it over 100,000 to somebody who's going to drive it some more. So I feel a little hypocritical to that end, but not too much. So they don't have that reputation, and they kind of need it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this podcast is all we think.
What?
And this podcast is all about what we think.
So, right, exactly. It's called
That's what you think.
Car-Pinionated.
Yes, it is. And differing opinions, if you got them, make sure you leave a comment in the comments below because we'd love to read them. We could be wrong. I reserve the right.
Yes, and sometimes we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't pretend.
Right. And that's the car thing. Everything to try and make a car that is all things to all people is like Abraham Lincoln saying you can't please all the people all the time. It's impossible because it's such a.
I thought that was Henry Ford.
What's that?
I thought that was Henry Ford.
Did Henry Ford say that?
I don't know. I don't know.
Could have been.
I'll put it down. Yeah.
All the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, but you can't do it.
You can only have it in black. I don't know.
Oh, that was Ford. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well. All right. Well, we're going to land this plane, dock this boat. Thank you, Glenn, for showing up on short notice. I appreciate it. And folks, we will be back next time. See ya.